Let's say you own 10,000 Ondo today and don't touch it until 2030. How much could it really be worth by then? If you bought 10,000 Ondo near the top, everything that happened afterward would feel backwards. At Ondo's record price of $2.14, those tokens were worth $21,400. Today, they are worth roughly $3,300. But Ondo Finance was not collapsing during that fall. Billions entered its treasury products. Its tokenized stock platform crossed $1 billion, and its regulated American subsidiary opened a path toward serving investors in the United States. The business kept winning. The token holder kept losing. That contradiction is the real story behind this prediction. Ondo could become one of the largest platforms in tokenized finance by 2030, while Ondo still disappoints. Or one change could finally connect the success of the platform to the token itself. That will decide what 10,000 Ondo is actually worth at the end of this decade. Ondo's rise began with one of the most boring assets in finance: short-term United States government debt. Crypto users were already holding billions in stablecoins. Those dollars could move around the world quickly, but most holders received none of the interest earned by the cash and treasury bills behind them. Ondo created USDY so eligible investors outside the United States could hold something similar to a digital dollar while receiving yield from short-term treasuries and bank deposits. By August 2026, USDY held roughly $2.15 billion. OUSG, Ondo's treasury product for qualified institutional investors, held hundreds of millions more. This proved that Ondo could attract real capital into useful financial products. Then it moved into a much larger market. In September 2025, Ondo stocks launched for eligible investors outside the United States. It allowed users to hold tokenized exposure to American stocks and exchange-traded funds inside a crypto wallet. Less than 8 months later, the platform crossed $1 billion in total value. Ondo said it controlled more than 70% of the tokenized equity market and had already processed around $18 billion in cumulative trading volume. Ondo was no longer focused mainly on putting treasury bills on chain. It was trying to bring the stock market with them. Then came 8 days in July 2026 that made this plan much easier to take seriously. Ondo first announced tokenized stocks using new infrastructure from DTC, part of the organization at the center of clearing and settling American securities. The next day, it partnered with SBI Group to work on bringing Japanese equities on-chain and distribute Ondo products through one of Japan's largest financial groups. 1 week later, Ondo's American broker-dealer subsidiary received new FINRA authorizations. Those approvals created a regulated route toward offering tokenized equities and funds to institutions and retail investors in the United States. For 10,000 Ondo to become a serious investment, Ondo needs access to far more than crypto users. Those developments gave it a believable route toward that larger market, and the market itself could become enormous. Citi estimates that tokenized financial assets could grow from around $17 billion in 2026 to $5.5 trillion by 2030. Its wider forecast runs from $2.7 trillion in a slower outcome to more than $8 trillion in a bull case. Government debt and public stocks are expected to drive much of that growth. Those are Ondo's two main markets. If Ondo captured only half of 1% of Citi's base forecast, around $27.5 billion of assets could sit on its platform. A 1% share would mean $55 billion. That is the foundation of the bullish case. But it is also where most Ondo predictions go wrong. Owning Ondo is not the same as owning Ondo Finance. Someone buying USDY does not need Ondo. Neither does someone purchasing tokenized Nvidia stock. The assets backing those products do not belong to Ondo holders. Officially, Ondo is a governance token for the Ondo DAO and Flux Finance. It does not give holders shares in Ondo Finance or a guaranteed part of the revenue generated by USDY, OUSG, or Ondo stocks. That single fact explains how Ondo's products can grow while ONDO falls. So far, this makes the token look less attractive than the company behind it, but one proposal could change the entire prediction. In June 2026, a community member proposed using part of the protocol's net revenue to buy Ondo from the market and permanently burn it. The suggested system would begin with 20% of net revenue and could later rise to 40%. If something like this were approved, growth in Ondo's products could finally create direct demand for Ondo. More revenue could mean more market purchases, while every burn would reduce supply. For holders, that would matter far more than another partnership announcement. But it has not happened. The idea was only a community temperature check, not a binding vote. There is no active automatic buyback and burn system today. Another possible catalyst is also uncertain. When Ondo first announced Ondo Chain, many investors expected Ondo to gain utility through gas fees, staking, or network security. That plan has since evolved into the Ondo network, which Ondo says is not a blockchain today. It may gradually open roles to bonded or proof-of-stake participants, but Ondo has not been confirmed as the required token. Network utility may become valuable later. It cannot be treated as part of the base case yet. Meanwhile, the supply clock keeps moving. Ondo has a maximum supply of 10 billion tokens, while roughly 4.9 billion are circulating. A major cliff unlock is scheduled for January 2027, and the wider vesting schedule continues into 2029. Not every unlocked token will be sold, but new buyers must absorb the additional supply before the price can hold a major rally. By 2030, the safest approach is to value Ondo using the full 10 billion token supply. At $1, that means a $10 billion valuation. The old high of $2.14 means 21.4 billion. $5 requires 50 billion. $10 requires $100 billion. The token looks cheap at around 33 cents. The valuation behind each future price is what really matters. Before Ondo can think about $5, it first has to survive the next 18 months. For the end of 2026, my base range is between 50 and 75 cents. That would make 10,000 Ondo worth between $5,000 and $7,500. A strong crypto recovery, meaningful activity from Ondo's American expansion, or progress toward a fee switch could move it closer to $1. Without one of those catalysts, a return to the old high this year looks too aggressive. The real test arrives in January 2027. Ondo may be attracting more assets at the same time that a large wave of supply becomes available. The price will show whether demand for the token is finally catching up with growth in the platform. If the market absorbs that supply and Ondo keeps expanding, my 2027 range is between 65 cents and $1.20. 10,000 tokens would then be worth between $6,500 and $12,000. A confirmed buyback system or a required role for Ondo inside the Ondo network could lift the stronger case toward $1.50. By 2028, investors should have a much clearer answer. They will know whether tokenized stocks are becoming a lasting market and whether Ondo can protect its early lead once major financial companies begin competing seriously. Nasdaq has already received approval to support the trading and settlement of certain securities in tokenized form. The New York Stock Exchange is also working with Securitize on a tokenized securities platform. Ondo is early, but it will not have this market to itself. If it remains one of the leaders and Ondo gains real value capture, a reasonable 2028 range is between $1.25 and $2.20. That would make 10,000 Ondo worth between $12,500 and $22,000. Reaching the upper end would take Ondo slightly above its previous record. Because far more tokens would exist by then, the valuation behind that price would be much larger than it was in 2024. Then we reach 2030. By that point, scheduled vesting should be behind us. The price will depend far more on how large Ondo has become and whether Ondo plays a necessary role inside its system. In the weak outcome, Ondo remains a respected platform but loses market share to banks, exchanges, and asset managers. Ondo never gains meaningful economic utility and trades between 50 cents and $1. 10,000 tokens would be worth only $5,000 to $10,000. In the base case, Ondo becomes one of the leading global platforms for tokenized treasuries, stocks, and funds. Its products grow from a few billion dollars today to somewhere around 30 to 60 billion by 2030. Its American expansion produces real activity, and Ondo gains at least a modest connection to revenue, staking, collateral, or network security. Under those conditions, my realistic 2030 range is between $2 and $3.50. 10,000 Ondo would be worth between $20,000 and $35,000. If I had to choose one number, it would be $2.70 per token. That would make 10,000 Ondo worth $27,000 in 2030. At that price, the full token supply would be valued at $27 billion. That is ambitious, but believable for a leading platform inside a market that could be worth several $trillion. The bull case requires Ondo to become one of the dominant global platforms for tokenized finance, keep its lead as major exchanges enter the market, and handle well above $100 billion in assets and demand activity. Ondo would also need recurring demand through buybacks, staking, collateral, network security, or another function that users cannot simply avoid. In that world, Ondo could reach between $5 and $7. 10,000 tokens would be worth between $50,000 and $70,000. A $10 Ondo is possible during an extreme crypto bull market. It would turn the position into $100,000, but it would also give Ondo a valuation of $100 billion. For that price to last, Ondo would need to become one of the most important financial networks in crypto, with Ondo sitting at the center of how that network operates. $10 is possible as a temporary peak. It is not the expected outcome. My most realistic single estimate for 10,000 Ondo in 2030 is $27,000. The large 2027 unlock will test demand. Ondo's expansion into regulated markets will test the business, and any fee switch or confirmed network role will show whether Ondo can finally capture part of the value being created around it. Ondo has already proved that people want its products. Now it has to prove that they need its token.